You're listening to the Holistic Nootropics Podcast, your home for holistic, evidence-based cognitive enhancement strategies. And now your host, Eric Levi.
Oscar Sierra, welcome to the Holistic Nootropics Podcast.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be here.
You're an herbalist practicing traditional and Chinese medicine out of Atlanta, or functional medicine. Sorry about that. And you crossed my path with this whole idea of practicing herbalism, because here in the nootropics and the biohacking space, I'm sure you see some people come along and everyone nowadays, especially with the COVID and especially with people looking for more and more alternative medicines, people are getting really into herbs. And I don't have an extensive history with herbs. I have kind of a fundamental understanding of them. I've done the research on them. I've read a lot of journals, but I feel like they go so further deep than just what can be written about them. So I was hoping maybe you can give, kind of a quick introduction as to really the way that you see herbal medicine, and this kind of idea of traditional Chinese medicine at large, and how you use it in your practice.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So yeah, traditional Chinese medicine is my background. And before that, I got my degree in nutrition science from the University of Georgia, which honestly was horrible. And this is on par with most of the nutrition programs in the country, but I'm not going to dwell on that. Most of what I learned about nutrition was through seminars and conferences and doing the work, like having patients on the table and running the labs, the urine, the stool, the blood work, the analyses that show that, on paper, they may be getting 2,000 calories, but of those, because of whatever genomic or genetic mutations are going on with them or their tumors, I work a lot with cancer patients, they really need a lot more of X, Y, and Z nutrient. And none of this stuff was taught in school, sadly. So, but anyway, yeah, after that, Chinese martial arts is kind of what got me into this whole mess. The concepts of qi and flow and yin and yang and balance translated into the Chinese medicine arts. I got my certification in licensure in acupuncture. And then that really got me into herbs, and herbs really got me into more functional medicine stuff. And it's all really kind of the same thing. It's systems engineering, it's big picture thinking, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And that's a common theme I come across, which is just, as a practitioner myself, it's the failure of mainstream education to truly help a practitioner understand nutrition, which is amazing because, like, if we're talking about medicine, we're talking about chemicals that we're literally putting in our body every day. And, that's why herbs fascinate on purpose. Exactly. Like, it's how we have to survive. And yet we understand so little of it, to the point now it's like you got the diet wars and everybody now is religious about their, about their diet. But the herbs fascinate me because they seem like this more concentrated nutrient that, you'll hear all kinds of claims like, anything from, this cured my Alzheimer's or cancer to, I can't go a day without it, all the way to the other side, which is like, oh, it's quackery, it's hocus pocus. And I mean, I use herbs myself. I listen to people who use herbs, and there is something to it. I'm and you've told me that you've had some great experiences with these different plant medicines as well.
Yeah. And it's all on a spectrum. You mentioned nutrients and food, herbs. And so it's kind of like, I'm just now formulating this as I'm saying it. I had always had the understanding that there's food, and then there's herbs, which are also food, like Job's tears, for example, in Chinese medicine, or mint, like it's common, or oregano or basil or, tulsi, kind of like turmeric, like it's kind of food, but it's also kind of an herb. So there's like, rice, or squash, a blueberry, right? And then which are good foods, lettuce, whatever. But then you start kind of transitioning into things that are more herbs and medicinal. And then you start concentrating these and maybe just take an actually, not whole milk thistle with the lignans and the fiber and the protein. You just take the silymarin and silibinin and or the berberine from your uva ursi or Coptis chinensis, and you use that more like a drug, which is not bad necessarily. It's not always what I do. And then you have like B6, which is just like, it's a nutrient. And it is almost drug-like when you use it in certain ways and very targeted ways, but it still kind of goes into dopaminergic pathways and the serotonergic pathways and helps make melatonin. So it's a dirty drug, if you will, so that it doesn't do just one thing. It does a few things, but it is one chemical, be it pyridoxine or pyridoxine 5-phosphate. And then you have drugs, which typically are one chemical, or always one chemical, and they are, at least historically, tried to hit one pathway, right? But as I'm thinking about this, and I think this, so it's on a spectrum of like kind of gentle medicine to more heroic medicine of like having a big, strong effect. Or there are some herbs that can do that. Your belladonnas, your aconite. This is heroic medicine that could kill you. But it could also, if you just use it right in a small amount, could really hit the mark. And now that I'm thinking about it, you can also zoom out from food. The things that we put purposefully, maybe not just in our mouth, but in our lives, of experiences and people and the environment, the quality of our air and water and our community. So it's all kind of like this spectrum of, from big to small. The drugs being kind of on the far end over here that have, single agent, single target, to experiences, which are like multivariable, multi-agent, multi-targeted. And herbal medicine is somewhere in between. And you can't exactly say where it stops because, of course, herbs have chemicals and phytochemicals, right? I've just been reading this really amazing thread on Herbal Hall, which is kind of all the authors of books and kind of famous, super wise old herbalists are on this email. We're talking about Ephedra, right, which unfortunately is banned in the U.S. because of it has ephedrine, and it's a chemical, and it can cause harm. But if you use the whole plant, and the plant in a formula, and the formula in the context of a person in an environment with someone that knows how to put all those things together, you're good. Anyway, I digress. There was maybe a question there at some point, but it just came to me while we were talking about this.
No, it's such an interesting point. And I'd love to, is that Herbal Hall thread, is that accessible to people, or is that?
Somehow it's an invite only, and somehow I got invited to it, even though I rarely chime in because it's like, who am I? I mean, like I'm 41 and I've been doing this for just 12, 13 years. And, most of the people on there have been doing this for way longer, and they're published authors, and they have PhD and all these things behind their name. And, they're my teachers. Like when I've been going to these seminars the last 10 years, these are the guys that I'm learning from. And occasionally I'll chime in, usually just something smart ass. But they're fascinating conversations to watch. And actually, what's also kind of funny is that they argue and occasionally bicker amongst themselves, which is just like really, for someone in the industry, kind of fun to watch.
So while you were talking, you made me think about this idea that's so interesting, which is like, okay, we take the big to the small. So I think where I kind of want to start things is this idea that, and you kind of alluded to this, which is maybe the mistake that we make as, citizen scientists, right? Or as biohackers, or as just people who want to be healthy, and we go to Costco and we go get like a bottle of ashwagandha, or we get a bottle of rhodiola or something. And we look at it almost like we do a pharmaceutical drug. Like we're trying to get an herb, a plant, or ginkgo or whatever it is, to give us the same reaction that we would get from something like, like an antidepressant or like a blood pressure medication, right? And I know with herbs, there's a lot more to it because it's not just the medicine. It's like the person themselves, like where are they coming from? Their constitution. Are they wet? Are they dry? Are they hot? Are they cold? Like, I don't even know if I'm phrasing this correctly, because I understand it can go a lot deeper than that. And then the idea of, well, if we are taking these herbs with a pharmacological purpose, then what we're also doing is not only where are we coming from, but we're missing all the rest of the plant compound that's also beneficial. So, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that, or at least your experience coming from that.
Yeah. I think, Eric, you're on it. And yes, so you have to just think, and it's okay. Like if you're looking for a little energy boost, to look at ashwagandha. Okay, cool. I would rather someone blindly, citizen scientists, go grab a bottle of Walmart ashwagandha than go, get some meth or, tons of coffee or, cocaine or something, or some, Vyvanse or something, prescription Vyvanse or Adderall from their doc. But it's still maybe missing the point of, well, why am I tired? Why can't I focus? Sure, ashwagandha is nice. Withania somnifera, it has a long track record of safety and efficacy. And that's not to say that it's a fit for everyone, because everyone has their own mojo, right? Some people run cold, some people run hot, some people run more damp, some people run more dry. And given their constitution, what they were born with, and given their environment, and given their condition, it either will be a fit or will not be a fit. And, the plants themselves have their own mojo. They are drying. They are, cinnamon at room temperature, nutmeg at room temperature, watermelon at room temperature, right? Like everyone kind of gets the fact that one is cooling, iceberg lettuce, watermelon, honeydew melon at room temperature is kind of cooling and moistening and refreshing. And, your dried ginger and nutmeg is kind of warming and hot and spicy, a little bit drying. So, a 2-year-old gets this. So the basics are there. Yes, you can take it to the more subtle levels of it's drying and warming, or, moving to the blood and warming, or it's, warming and opens the channels, or warming and diaphoretic and makes you sweat, or warming and moves the blood in the uterus. There's different subtle flavors, just like a chef, understands flavors. These are, people have their own mojo and flavors, and plants have their own mojo and flavors. And when you combine the plants together in an entree for the right person in the right season and the right constitution, you can really hit home runs. And sure, every blue moon, you'll hit a home run with simply getting your one bottle of ashwagandha for the one person that happened to, fit the exact indication for that plant. And maybe even they, open their head to like, oh, once I took this ashwagandha, I realized that the reason I was tired is because I just wasn't sleeping. And the reason I wasn't sleeping is because I hate my girlfriend. She's just super annoying. And she makes these horrible sounds all night long, and she doesn't let me sleep. And I don't even know why I'm with her anyway. Now that we've broken up and I realize that I'm gay and that I sleep so much better, I don't need ashwagandha anymore. I just made that up, obviously. No, you get the idea.
So ashwagandha can help you realize you're gay. Okay, got it. That's it, basically. Yeah. They don't put that on the label. And that's such an interesting thing about supplements in general, which is we take them in such an uncontrolled sample, right? Like we take supplements, and it's like you said, there's all this other stuff happening in your life. There's also your diet, there's the chemicals that you eat in food, there's your own stress level, there's your own relationship level, and then you can get those beneficial oxytocin hormones like when you're in a good relationship, right? When you're around friends. And then you start taking something like, like an herb, like an ashwagandha or a ginkgo or something, and all of a sudden you start feeling better. But was it the plant, or was it like a combination of all of these things? I think we forget that we're just a lab, right? We're just a chemistry lab, and the more chemicals we put in, the different the reaction's going to be.
Yeah, and the answer to your question is yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So kind of going back then, because so much of it does depend on a person's personal constitution, right? Is there a way to know, like, do you run hot or do you run cold? Do you run damp? Do you run dry? Is there a way that a person can kind of figure that out? And then when they do figure that out, is there like a Rosetta Stone or something that you can tap into that would know, okay, this is the herb that's right for me, or this is the plant or the mushroom or whatever it is that's right for me?
That's a great question, and I get asked that recently because there's been people so I'm an herbalist and an acupuncturist, and I have this clinic here, and we're okay, but we're definitely not making tons of money, and sometimes we do have a hard time making payroll. So there's lots of people that really care about me and what we're doing and are trying to help, and they're like, well, you're an amazing herbalist and like you formulate these great things. Why don't you just like come out with a product and sell a bunch of those? Because you got organic herbs, use reverse osmosis water. Like no one else is doing this. No one else is compounding the Chinese herbs with Western herbs, and you're doing the blood work and blah, blah, blah. But like, can't you just come up with a couple, 2, 3 products? A nootropic, that's a big deal. Or, and I'm like, that's not that's, I make one product for one person at one point in time, which might be that person 2 weeks later might be different. And we need to, I don't make one product for the masses because it's going to hit some of the time and totally be wrong some other time. And so they said, well, is there like some of these guys are IT guys. And I'm like, well, the way you formulate, they're hot or cold, they crave sweet or they crave salty, they crave this or that. Like I can program a computer if there's just people to just answer some questions, and then we can even do like AI machine learning to where like people answer the questions themselves and the machine starts learning how to be like you. And I'm like, well, that's very cool and a little scary. But sure, that's maybe, it's an art and it's a science. So yes, you can ask, the 15, 30, 40, 50 questions. Do you run hot or cold? Do you crave sweet or salty? Is your tongue pale or red? Are your eyes, red or dry? Are you shaped like me that's tall and skinny? Or I have like a lot of neck. 5 of my fingers are not enough to cover my neck. Some people are just built like bricks and they're not fat. They're just kind of built like a brick and they don't have a neck. So that's an earth constitution, and that makes them susceptible to some things and makes their condition more susceptible to damp and whatever. But you can theoretically, come up with an algorithm to figure this stuff out, I suppose. And that would maybe get you close. And then there's just some subjective there's an art too, it's kind of like, I guess you could program a computer to write like Bach, and that has been done, and it sounds like Bach. Would I want to sit through a concert of a computer playing Bach? No, probably not. Anyway, yes, you can, it is both a science, you can read the functional lab work and say, if the iron is below this level and their red blood cells and hemoglobin and hematocrit are below this level, they are iron deficient anemic, and therefore if they weigh this much, you give them this much iron. But that's not a meal, that's a carrot. How do you formulate meals that have to do with not just the iron, but iron with a little vitamin C, with the right mix of other herbs and nutrients at the right time for the right person, with the right exercise regime and the right frame of mind, and that is the art of it. But yeah, the herbs have their own mojo. You should attune it to the person's first and foremost condition, then their environment, and then their constitution. And yeah, you could get pretty close with math and an algorithm, I suppose, if that's what you're into.
Are there herbs or plants that you don't want to use together? Like I've heard, for instance, you can be either ashwagandha or rhodiola, but you don't want to use those together because they're two different, even though they have adaptogenic qualities, they are meant for two different people, but not at the same time. Is that true? Or do you have anything like that where you say these are two plants that kind of like, they don't go together for the same person?
There are definitely plants that cancel each other out and nullify each other and sometimes augment their potential toxicity. Those are few. And it's a similar question that if you were going to ask a chef, and this is maybe back when I had a TV, the kind of things that they would do on those cooking shows 15 years ago, is they would say, the top chef or whatever, we're like, okay, we've got a sweet potato and a piece of mousse and ketchup, make an amazing meal. And they're seemingly disparate things, right? And you would say like, well, I wouldn't really ever combine on those things, but like artistry, if you just give them some time and space and creativity in the right situation, no, I would say there's no hard and fast rule. Like I'm sure some chef, looked at those disparate ingredients, cornflakes and, mousse and, I don't know, some weird ingredients. And then I've seen these chefs like crush up the cornflakes and then like, put them in a batter and then like do something really interesting and creative. And the judges were like, holy crap, you did it, So the same thing with herbal medicine. There's no hard and fast rules. We're trying to accomplish something here. There are definitely some guidelines, and there are a few things that you don't want to use together. I wouldn't say particularly ashwagandha and rhodiola you don't want to use together. They are kind of opposites. Ashwagandha is quite warming, and rhodiola is cold and very astringent. I've actually seen formulas with both of those together, but they definitely put some moistening agents in there and little licorice. Licorice makes everyone play together in the same sandbox fairly well. That's why it's in 95% of all Chinese herbal formulas. It just is like the peacemaker within meals or formulas. So to answer your question, but if sometimes it's called for, and if you know what you're doing, just like a chef, like you can, no one would think cornflakes and moose meat would be like in a recipe together, but these great chefs, and if you just give them a little bit of kitchen space, they can really formulate something pretty cool.
Wow. In regards to specifically different conditions, so, I talk a lot about the adaptogens because I've really been diving into this idea of stress hormones and stress response and the HPA axis, because I find a lot of people are dealing with stress. Stress is the heart of, most chronic disease. And
taking my adaptogens now.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'm glad I reminded you to take your adaptogens. But I'm wondering for things like something like ADHD. You have this massive complex of so many people taking pharmaceuticals like Adderall or Ritalin for ADHD and to focus. And even in the nootropic space, with there's the popular smart drugs like modafinil, right? And where I'm coming from is I'm always trying to look at, well, what is the natural alternative? What would work in that place? Because at the same time, when you take those, of course, you're going to get that pharmacological response. But when you want to stop taking it, assuming you've dove deep into taking it too consistently and you might have gotten addicted to it, now you want to find something that's a little bit more natural, less addictive. So if you're working with somebody who is specifically working with one of these focused drugs but wants to get off, where do you start, as an herbalist? What are some good herbs that help kind of replace those drugs?
Okay, I hear your question, and I will say the same quick caveat that I said earlier, that let's just assume that their diet either because of you or someone else is now on point, and let's assume that their environment is clean, they're not inhaling mold every day, which can cause brain fog. And no amount of my ashwagandha or ginkgo or lion's mane or rosemary will clean up their moldy carpet at home or their moldy vents, right? So let's just assume that you got your mold guy to come out and do some sampling and air quality testing, that the water is clean, their environment is on point, including their social environment, their exercise. Let's assume that all of those things are now taken care of, either because you were diligent enough to ask the questions, or you delegated to the environmental mold guy, or the dietitian, or the exercise guy, and the rabbi, the priest, taking care of the spiritual stuff. So let's just assume that all of that has been at least looked at and is being worked on. Now let's get to the herbs, right? Okay. I would say if this person is looking to increase focus and concentration, I would ask, but yeah, there's some herbs that it's still like the herbs are according to, why? Is it that they're nervous? Is it that they're sleepy? Is it that they get distracted easily? Right? But if their mind is kind of like getting distracted easily, it's not that they're tired or sleepy, then I would look at things to calm and settle the mind. I would look at a Gotu Kola. I would look at a Bacopa, especially if their constitution is more earth-like, or they're damp, they're puffy under the eyes, their tongue is swollen and it has scalloped marks, if they're maybe a little bit overweight, if they have some water retention. Bacopa as a tea, I'm drinking tea infusions all day long, adaptogens and other nootropics. It doesn't taste great. It doesn't taste bad. It is a little bit drying to the palate. I like it as a tea, but it really needs, it's kind of like, parsley. It's nice. I like it. It's good for your breath, but it's not a meal. It's not balanced, right? So you need to combine it with something a little moistening, because it's a little drying. And if that other moistening thing is also a little sweet, like licorice or like milky oats or like tilia or linden, then it makes a nice tea. And I've given it to kids and had a good effect. So those are calming. So for the person that has like their brain is kind of going all over the place, the Centella, Gotu Kola, the Bacopa, with some demulcent moistening thing as a tea. Sure, you could do it as a capsule. That would be fine as well. A tincture would be okay as well. But I like teas. It keeps people hydrated. It helps them, it makes them go pee. They got to get up from their computer and go do something different. We should not be staring at any, let alone a screen, but you could stare at a duck, that's 2 feet away from your face for an hour, and it's just not good for eyeballs, right? Our eyeballs are not meant to use the muscles to focus on something 3 feet away from your face for hours on end. So you need to go get up and look at something far away every once in a while. And sometimes that in and of itself can help. So drinking tea will make you go up and use the bathroom. And so I kind of like that better than capsules. There's some herbs that taste god awful though, which I'm okay with putting in a capsule. So I would look at the Bacopa, I would look at Centella, I'd mix it with some licorice, and that makes a lovely tea. I make something similar here in my clinic called the Focus Pocus Mix. And, for different people, it's a little bit more Centella or a little bit more Bacopa. I'll put a little green tea in there for people because of the theanine. Green tea is also a little calming, but, it gives you a little caffeine if you're trying to wean off of harder stimulants or a lot of coffee because of your HPA axis or, whatever else. Rather than just telling someone a quick coffee, I might throw a little green tea in their mix. And there's some other topicals that you can put directly in your adrenals of adaptogens like black spruce that kind of helps them not have the crashes of coming off of coffee and the headaches and stuff like that. So that's one scenario. If you want to throw some other scenarios out of people, there's many reasons why someone might use an Adderall or a Vyvanse or, some other crutch.
Sure. Yeah. With the drugs themselves, what I find is the word crutch is an interesting word because I do find that for a lot of people it's a habit. I think it has a pharmacological, grasp on people. But I think there's also this kind of self-talk that we have where it's like, I can't focus without my Adderall, right? Or I can't get it together, or I have attention deficit disorder. I can't stay focused, right? And so the reason I ask about the herbs specifically is because I think people, in an ideal world, it would be great to live in a not moldy house. But for a lot of people, that's difficult to impossible, right? I think for a lot of people, the diet thing is tricky because I work with people with diet issues, and it's just more of like to change the diet. That's like literally trying to turn a cruise ship, around on a dime, because it's like, well, I don't know how to eat if I don't have my routine of food all day. So, I think that's where the supplements come in. And for many people, they can be helpful because it's like, well, all these other things I can't change, or I can change them very slow to the point where I'm not actually seeing an effect, which is why I go with the drugs, because the drugs give me the effect that I notice. So, but the drugs are now making me dependent and diminishing my quality of life. So now I'm looking at the herbs because everyone's telling me the herbs are great and they're potent. So that's why I think that it's great to understand, like, it's like you said, you have to really know, like, do you like the tea? Do you like the capsule? The capsule's easier for people because you can pop it and go. The tea can be a little off-putting. But I'm a fan of the tea myself.
Like I said, some of them taste awful, and I make Chinese herbal decoctions, and for the most part, I have a whole equipment here to brew. I mean, it's huge industrial equipment to brew decoctions. That is to say, polypharmacy, lots of herbs, water-based decoctions, or you brew them up as a tea. It's not really a tea; it's a decoction. This is a tea. You put cold water in with some leaves and twigs and berries and flowers, and you have, colored water, and that has the phytochemistry that you're looking for. A lot of these taste okay. Like I said, the ones that I mentioned, Centella tastes pretty good. It smells like antique furniture, which for me, it has a nice, I have good memories about antique furniture at my grandmother's house and my great-grandmother's house. It doesn't taste bad. It tastes pretty good. I kind of woody, put a little licorice in there, and some demulcents, and I haven't had anyone that doesn't like the taste of it. Bacopa, like I said, is a little roasty. Sometimes I'll put that in mixes where people are, I don't poo-poo coffee, but if someone, for whatever reason, needs to come off of coffee, I'll make roasty flavored teas, and Bacopa is usually definitely in there. But yeah, you're right. So sometimes a tincture will work well because it's somewhat portable. You don't have to carry around one of these when you're, going around the country, airport to airport. The pills, of course, they all have their pros and cons. So it's important to just but to your point, though, that you can actually address a little, give someone a crutch and have them work on their home air quality. Like behind me right here, you see that thing right here is Austin Air. There it is. That's or IQ Air, rather. I have Austin's Air, the other part of the office. That's it's a $1,100 air filtration unit that filters out not just little, pieces of things in the air, also filters out gases like mycotoxins. So while someone is doing the tea, maybe they can't afford to move out of their house right now, but they can at least they can take their carpets outside and smack them. Or get someone else to. I take a blower, actually, like a leaf blower to my carpets every few weeks, and my air filters. So there's always something that you can do, right? You can open windows. You can get a air filter, a good one, at least a HEPA filter. I find them at Goodwill all the time. There's one across the street from our office when people are like, oh, I can't afford to move out of my mold because I run mycotoxin tests, right? Like a urine test, and they're full of mycotoxins, and then I have a guy come out to your house and And they're like, yeah, your house is super moldy. I'm like, well, I can't afford to sell it right now, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, well, what can you do? Can you flush these things out of your system a little bit more? Some of the same herbs that I just mentioned, green tea, Centella, the science from being, nootropic in that they calm your mind and help you focus, they're also detox agents. They actually help you upregulate your detox. Actual science on 4 steps. People talk about milk thistle for liver detox, right? And milk thistle, silymarin is great. But what about all these other herbs that I think milk thistle upregulates 4 different steps in phase 2 liver detox, right? With its chemical pathways of like this compound turns into this compound with the help of, B2, and this compound then turns into this compound with the help of, B6, and then that turns into this with the help of selenium, and then out you go in the urine because you made something fat soluble and water soluble. And if you look at the science of this stuff, like green tea covers 4 steps. You never hear about green tea being used for detox. Green tea is like one of the few things that can help take, and turmeric can help take mercury out of the brain. So the drugs can't even do that. They don't cross the blood-brain barrier. So if you've got heavy metals in your brain, none of the drug chelation is not going to go suck that out of your brain, but green tea can. So we talk about, these things being used as nootropics, but these are pleiotropic agents. These are multitaskers. They don't do one thing. They do many things. And who's to say that it's the theanine in green tea, right? There's hundreds of, maybe thousands of compounds. We've only identified caffeine and the ECGC, right? And maybe theanine and maybe a small handful of other chemistry in there. But we don't know. There's no green tea advisory board, lobbying congressmen and NIH to fund green tea research, even though it is the most commonly drank substance in the world. I think it's right up there with Coca Cola. So, but no one's, they're not making money off of this stuff, right? But the Dutch East India Company is long gone. So their monopoly on green tea is over. Now there's Lipton, for better or worse. So, these are pleiotropic agents that yes, we can think of them as a nootropic in some form or fashion. Either they help stimulate the brain, like rosemary or like black spruce, or they help calm the brain, like a nervous brain, like your Bacopa and your lavender and your Tulsi, and in a more kind of extreme case, a passion flower, right, can really calm the brain down, take it down a notch so you can focus. But you have to remember that these things also do these other things. And we don't even know half the things that they do. I mean, the herbalists know, but the herbalists can't necessarily, I have this colleague, Robin McGee. She's hilarious, and she's an amazing herbalist, makes amazing medicine, right? Generations worth of herbalists in South Carolina, and she's a country bumpkin. It doesn't get more country than Robin McGee. And she knows herbs, and they talk to her and she talks to them. But if you ask her, oh, Robin, white oak bark, why is it so astringent? And why does it help heal wounds and itchiness and poison ivy so well? Is it the tannic compounds? She'll say, maybe, I don't know. It's PFM. It's pure fairy magic. And sometimes the F is something else also. But who cares? She's like, it works. I know it works because I've seen it work a million times. If you want to find out the chemistry, cool, good for you. But thousands of years worth of it works was good enough for Jesus and frankincense and myrrh, the stuff that was given to him. I'm into chemistry, but I'm also into traditional knowledge and wisdom. So we can use both.
We can absolutely use both. And you make a good point. You said that you call it the pleiotropic?
Pleiotropic, yeah. Pleitopic, pleiotropic. It means that something covers 2 or 3 birds with one stone, or is a multitasker.
I believe that is really that's like the next generation of holistic medicine. I know maybe you're on it, but there's still this, it's like this transition of, okay, what was it? 100 years ago, this is when the mainstream pharmaceutical complex came in and really took everything over. Right. And before that, it was like the homeopathy and the more traditional medicines. Right. But now we're kind of coming back to, okay, we want those herbs and we want the homeopathy. We want the traditional medicines. By the way, this was interesting. I've said this on a few podcasts, but when COVID first hit, I use Google Trends a lot. I don't know if you've ever used Google Trends. It's a really interesting tool. You can just go and see what are people Googling, And when COVID first hit, you saw literally a hockey stick shaped curve on the keyword homeopathy. Like people were Googling homeopathy in March and April, like they've never Googled this before. It was absolute nuts. And it's empirical evidence. You can't debate. It's like Google's telling you right there, this is what people are Googling. But what the mistake people are making with these herbal medicines is that they want it to do the thing that the Adderall and the modafinil and the SSRIs are doing. They want it to be like, here's the target, get the target. But it's like you said, it's a pleiotropic effect where it might hit the target, it might hit around the target, but there's all these other things going on in the body because of these medicines that also play into it hitting the target. Like I talk a lot about detoxification for brain health, because it's like you said, we have to build the phase 1, the phase 2, and the phase 3. You got to get stuff out of you. You got to literally be able to poop it out. So the gut health is good, not just for making neurotransmitters, but it's also got to get all these toxic things that your liver is detoxing out. You got to get it out, or otherwise it gets recirculated. The glial cells in the brain have to be able to detox all of the stuff that's in the brain. And then it's like you said, now are we actually talking about a mind that can't focus? Are we lifting the brain fog? Because people are looking at brain fog like, well, what is it? Is it because I'm depressed? Is it depression? Well, I'll take an antidepressant. And it's like, well, it could be a million things. And these herbs are as close as you're going to get, along with the good diet and the mold free and all these other stuff, to hitting other points in your body, lowering blood pressure, lowering your heart rate. I mean, that also plays into your, to your kind of skittishness, right? Like your stress level. If your heart rate's up, you're going to feel stressed out. You're going to feel very antsy. You're going to feel very anxious. You're going to feel very ADHD. I
would say the herbs in the hands, in the skilled hands of a practitioner, just like a chef, I've been reading about carrots and they're, they have these carotenoids and they're precursors to vitamin E and they're good for your eyes and like antioxidants and they're awesome. And I've been reading about organic moose meat, which is like super high in these vitamins and B12 and, like iron. And it's like, if you eat it just raw, it's super good for you. And like, but you need a chef to kind of like figure out, well, how much carrot to how much moose to how much of this other spice to make it a meal and make it appropriate for you in your condition, with your constitution in a particular environment, right? So fortunately, if you blindly go into a Walmart and get some ashwagandha and moose meat and a carrot, you're not going to kill yourself, but if it doesn't work for someone, don't blame the herb. Look towards someone that might guide you a little bit better as to like, oh, hey, if you combine ashwagandha with old B6 and quit inhaling mold every day, it's going to be like a home run. And give it a couple weeks. So yes, sometimes actually it does work immediately. Like when you really, dial in all the things, the first couple days. Yeah, I have had plenty of patients say that they get the effect of what they were experiencing with the pharmaceuticals within a couple days. That's rare, right? But it took dialing into like, oh, I shouldn't eat this ice cream right before I study, and that leaky thing on my tiles from above like had something to do with my brain fog, and this tea like can help me focus. Like when you dial all those things in, you can get you can get some pretty quick effects. So yes, herbal medicine covers a lot of bases and is gentle and helps you detox and can achieve goals, and it takes time. But also, yes, sometimes it can happen fairly quickly. And actually, sometimes people are not even emotionally ready to get better that quickly because they've been sick for so long, which is a totally different topic.
So this has been really interesting. I wanted to, before we sign out, I wanted to ask you about mushrooms, because I understand mushrooms could maybe be considered herbs, but they almost kind of feel like they're their own. They're definitely their own class of compound. But do you use mushrooms as well in your practice?
Every day. It is every traditional system of medicine in the world that I know of has some form of mushroom medicine in there, and decoctions, right? You boil them up is kind of the traditional way, and fruiting bodies are traditionally what's used. That's not to say that mycelium is worthless, and that's not to say that tinctures are, alcohol extracts are great at getting the terpenes out. What I recommend is all of the above. Is you get the mycelium, you get the fruiting body, you got a water extract to get the polysaccharides out and the water soluble things, and you also do an alcohol extract and get the fat soluble things and the triterpenes, and you put all of these things together again under the skillful hand of a practitioner that knows about dosing. Right, most people totally underdose on mushrooms.
You say the underdose. Underdose. Interesting. Explain that.
They just don't take enough. They're like, I'm taking, 3, because it says on the bottle right here, it says, Host Defense, Paul Stamets' company, nice guy, 3 capsules a day. And no, pretty much almost across the board for herbal medicine, don't go with what it says on the bottle. Get to someone that knows what they're talking about, that can get you a really great product. And then, sometimes it matters with food or without food. Oftentimes, I'm at least doubling the dose. And for that reason, it sometimes just gets to be a lot of pills, which is why I try to do things as a liquid extract as much as possible, so you're not just downing 40 pills. So, yeah, underdosing, it's super common. I typically don't mess with anything under, 3 grams of mushrooms a day. And again, some of these you can just eat, like maitake, you can just cook it up. It's amazing for blood sugar issues. And you can get it as a capsule. It grows in Georgia here where I am. I found it before, saute it up with some, garlic and a little white wine and some oil, and it's a meal if you combine it right. Sure, you can get it as a capsule, but why wouldn't you want to just eat it? If they sell it dried, it's fairly cheap. I've seen better results on maitake mushroom than on pharmaceuticals for lowering hemoglobin A1C.
Wow. This is something I actually wanted to ask you about too. With or without food, does it depend on the herb or the mushroom? Can you take all of them with food? Do you want to avoid food? Because I've heard all answers on the spectrum here. So I'm wondering what you think.
Generally speaking, where you're trying to get fat soluble things like vitamin D, A, K, E, you do it with food. So fat with food. And generally speaking, if you're trying to get the water soluble stuff, you do it between meals, but it'll also usually work with meals as well. My favorite way to administer, this is totally new. So this might kind of, all right. So I like tinctures, I like decoctions, I like infusions for teas. Capsules are fine. I love, and this is harder to get, lipos of fresh. Lipo is not technically not liposomal. It's a emulsion of fresh mushroom, and this is the hard part because you have to find these things fresh. So I have a couple friends here in Atlanta that grow lion's mane fresh. Of course, it won't stay forever, but if you put it in wax paper, in your fridge, it'll stay for a while. This does not taste good, but if I had a patient that was really looking to get a quick effect, especially the nootropic or anything from a medicinal mushroom, I would have them get the fresh mushroom with oil, ideally udozole, something super, super clean and organic, in a Vitamix, a high-speed blender. And you whip the crap out of it in a high-speed blender, and it'll make a slurry, right? And it will taste bad. And I put a couple of, orange flavor, a little licorice, some tinctures of some other things, a tiny hint of black pepper, And it crosses the barriers of cells, especially the myofascial covering on neurons, especially for lion's mane. And there's few counts of reversal of Parkinson's, of complete turnarounds of neurologic conditions. But you can't get yes, the pills now, all those things are nice, but you have to find the fresh mushroom, a Vitamix, and some oil, and just make a little bit of slurry, and it tastes awful. I usually mix that into a smoothie with some berries and some coconut milk and lots of ginger, and you can usually hide the flavor of this oily, disgusting sludge into that, but you have to have a pretty willing person to do it. So that's my favorite way to administer herbal medicine, is as a slurry, if you will.
The mushroom. So would you do the same if you had, let's say, a powder version of an herb? Would you also take that with food?
The powder version of an herb, yes, I would do it with food. And but I think for mushrooms, I don't think it's a big deal, to my knowledge, either way, one way or the other, to do with or without food.
I probably could ask you questions for another couple hours, because this is so fascinating, and I feel like we're just now starting to understand better, this kind of herbal thing. I think the way that you speak of herbs is very is enlightening, for people, because people find me and they go, oh, this is a podcast all about nootropics. And it is, we talk a lot about nootropics, but more than anything, what I'm trying to help people understand is that nootropics are just one part of this much bigger equation. And I find this so true, especially when it comes to things like plant medicines, herbs, mushrooms, because these are not drugs, right? They do a lot of things, and for each person the things are different. And so you can't just rely on just the herb or just the mushroom or just the plant to do the one thing that you wanted to do, because it could do a lot of things for you. And you might get a lot of benefit from those things. You might also not get benefit from those things. It might actually work, counter to what you want. So it's good to talk to somebody who's in this, who uses these herbs like a chef, right? And you make these concoctions specifically for specific people.
That's it. Yeah, that's there's a science to it, and there's an art to it, and it's always important to zoom out and look at the big picture. That's the short of the takeaway, I guess, if I was going to boil it down. Yeah. If people want to find out more, I would say the American Herbalist Guild, right? It's on my mug here, American Herbalist Guild, a great resource. I have an apothecary and clinic here in Atlanta, Georgia, Sierra Botanica and Collaborative Medicine. Can find me there, and go experiment with some mushroom medicine or some ashwagandha, and sure, it's not going to hurt you probably. I've had some people have bad effects, but you're way more likely to get bad effects from a drug. And if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then go find an herbalist that can really craft a meal and a meal plan for you. And that would be my recommendation.
That's great. And we'll put all your references there in the show notes. So if anybody's listening and wants to work with you, do you do telemedicine? Like, do you all over the computer, or?
I do. And I recently started working with my mentor, Donnie Yans, who's based out of Oregon, in the Deary Center, seeing cancer patients. So they're cancer patients. They're from all over the world, actually. So all of my consults for that gig are via Zoom, and but I still see a lot of patients in person here. I like to feel their pulse before I look at their lab work or their urine results from their organic acids test or the mycotoxin results. I'd like to know nothing about them and just feel a pulse, see if it's fast or slow, weak or thin, deep or superficial, or some combination of those things. And simply based on that, usually can come up with a pretty good prescription plan just based on their pulse. Obviously, can't do that over the phone, but I can look at their tongue, they can upload pictures, they can send the lab work, they can tell me their signs and symptoms, and I can usually come up with just as good of a plan based on those other bits of data.
That's amazing. And like I said, we'll put all of that in the show notes. So if somebody does want to work with you, if they are looking for a professional herbalist, traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, I would certainly encourage them to seek out your expertise. So this has been great. Oscar, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Listener, if you enjoyed what you heard today, you want to see the full show notes of this episode, go on over to holisticnootropics.com/Oscar Sierra, and we'll have all the links, everything we talked about in this episode right there. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks for listening. For more brain-boosting info, in-depth articles, and show notes, check out holisticnootropics.com.